Hello and welcome to this episode of For Your Consideration. Now, this question came to us via Twitter, and that's at How2GM. You'll find us on the Twitter sphere out there, and occasionally whining and complaining and sharing and wondering and laughing, and it's just a wonderful, wonderful space to chat and communicate and learn from other GMs and ask questions. So, this question was: how do you plan and run a heist? Now, a heist, or a bank job, a robbery, a train job, anything along those lines where the objective is to get something out of a secure space and get away with it. So many films, so many books have been based on this, and we love to see these heists happening. There's a reason for it, I suppose, is because it's outfoxing the man who set up the secure place in the first place, and then to see how they get away with it, or if they don't get away with it. So that means that we have lots of expectations for this particular type of adventure. But before we get to how do we design the adventure, we need to unpack first what are the elements that make up a heist. Now, all heists, it really doesn't matter whether you're watching Ocean's 11, Ocean's 12, Ocean's 13, Ocean's 14. I really do wonder if they're ever going to stop. If you watch any of those, if you watch something like The Italian Job, the original one, or the remake, if you watch The Great Train Robbery, it doesn't matter. All heist movies and books, all heists in general, as a matter of fact, and this is also in real life, I've been reliably told, consist of three phases. Three phases. Phase 1. Assemble your team. We need a safecracker. We need an explosives expert. We need a driver. We need muscle. We need a fence. We need a decoy. We need a mastermind. We need a this. We need a that. We need the next thing. So you have your assembly phase where you're putting together your team. And oftentimes the team is reluctant, or you have to break them out of prison first to get them, or you have to do all sorts of fancy, weird and wonderful things. As a GM, this is where you should be paying a lot of attention, because a heist can be a mini campaign within your greater campaign, because a heist lends itself to so many little adventures in between to build up to the grand finale. So you have to assemble your team, phase 1. Phase 2, the heist happens. The actual ploy goes off. They break into the bank. They steal the gem. They get the thing. They do whatever it is. Phase 3, the chase. Now, there is no such thing as a heist movie without a chase. You have to have a chase. And you're going to see that who is being chased depends on your type of group of players. Now, the idea behind the three phases is that now that we know that there are three phases, phase 1 is assemble team, phase 2 is the heist, and phase 3, of course, is the chase, the escape, or the capture. So we have our three phases. Great stuff. Now we can start to plan our adventure. Well, not yet, because it depends on whether your players are good or evil. If they are a group of good players and they are stealing an object, the heist is to acquire something from bad guys, then it becomes an adversarial situation. It becomes a situation where it's the players versus the keepers of the object in order to get the object. If your characters that are doing the heist are evil, and they're doing this for self-gratification, they're doing this for self-benefit, for self-profit, then you have an avoidance type of heist. So adversarial versus avoidance. Now, what is the difference? Why should we even differentiate? Well, the reason is because the type of heist is then going to change. In an adversarial heist, so this is where the good guys are basically going up against the bad guys to get an object. Adversarial says that obstacles are now evil. So if the players go, oh, there's lots of security guards, they're all bad guys, we can now attack and kill them with impunity. There's no sense of guilt. There's no sense that we are wrong because we are the good guys taking from the bad guys. No one would ever shed a tear for the Nazi guard number 53 that's been killed or blown up as they are trying to get the gold out of the bank, because it's Nazi gold and it's Americans who are trying to get it, aka Kelly's heroes, which had an assembly phase, by the way, as well as, then of course, the heist, and then it had a chase sequence to a degree. Anyway, the idea is that in an adversarial, obstacles are evil. So any obstacle that the players come across, they can assume is evil and therefore can be defeated and overcome with justification. The team that gets assembled for this, so the individuals that are now working with the party, it could be the party, but I always advocate that you need to bring in some NPCs. Not only will this stretch you as a GM, but it'll also give you the opportunity of introducing NPCs that could become long-term NPCs, but also, according to the expectations of a heist, one of the members is going to backstab the party halfway through the heist and make off with the goods, or is going to betray them to the evil villain from whom they are trying to steal. So that's an expectation, and that means you can play with it. You know how I love to take expectations and turn them on their heads. So now, your NPCs that you create, one of them should be shifty and shady and act as if he's going to betray the group. But of course, he or she is the one who saves the group from the actual one who is the betrayer, who was the cool, calm and collected one, or who was the sultry seductress, or the whatever. So you can start to play around with that, because we're going to expect it to happen anyway. And if it doesn't happen, we're kind of going to feel, well, it would have been nice if it had happened. So something to bear in mind. Now, the heist happens, the characters in a good story where the good guys are trying to steal something, it happens. They get the thing, only to realize that they haven't got the thing. They get to the vault, they steal the vault, they get back to their secret lair, they open the vault, it's already empty, and there's a card in the middle of it saying, "I got here first, sorry for you." I went Irish because there's a wonderful book about Irish thieves in Johannesburg in the 1880s that were safe crackers and safe thieves and things. Anyway, that's beside the point. So the idea here is that the heist succeeds, but they fail to get the object. The object has already been taken. So now the chase section, the chase phase, is to now chase down the villain who has it, and to get it before it is destroyed, sold, used, eaten, consumed, whatever. So the focus changes to now chasing after the villain and capturing the villain, and of course thwarting the villain ultimately, and then getting the thing that they were after in the very first place. So that's how an adversarial type of heist plays out. An avoidance type of scenario, where it's bad guys doing a bad thing, stealing from good people arguably, or from ambiguous people, or from evil people, doesn't really matter, but if the party is inherently evil, obstacles now need to be worked around. They cannot afford to simply kill everybody. They just can't do it, because they are already committing a bad crime. So anyone that they kill is just being added to their tally. We don't think anything if the good guys kill bad guys. That's fine. We don't want to hold them up for murder whatsoever. They haven't done a trial. There's been no justice. There's been no jury. There's been no. It's fine. Kill them. They're bad because they work for the bad guy. When bad guys kill good guys, it's a tragedy and it's an outrage. So generally speaking, what happens is you have an avoidance situation. So the bad PCs have to avoid killing people. They don't want to be detected. They have to keep a very low profile. The team is all shifty and are all traitors. That's what's expected. If you look at Reservoir Dogs, this is a classic example of a bunch of bad guys who are in a bad situation, and it's even worse. Now, in Reservoir Dogs, what makes it so interesting and this is why Tarantino was such an interesting scriptwriter, is because the entire film happens in phase 2, end of. They've done it. Now we need to play out. And we discover through the telling of phase 1, we learn how they were all slowly roped in, then we learned how the heist actually happened and went down, and then of course there is a chase sequence at the very end, and so it continues onwards. But by shifting around phase 2 and phase 1, we change our expectations. And you can absolutely do that, but in a role-playing situation, it could be a little bit tricky to set up. So do it, why not? Anyway, back to the main point. So the team is all shifty. Everyone is a bunch of traitors. They're all going to betray each other because they're all evil. That's what it is to be evil. You are not reliable. So they are all going to betray each other at one stage or another, and it's expected. We don't expect all of Dr. Evil's minions to work together happily. They're all going to try and outdo one another at the very end, aren't they? We know that that's going to happen. So when it doesn't happen, we feel cheated. And of course, then they get the heist. They succeed in getting the heist. So unlike the good guys who managed to get the object, but they didn't actually get the object, here the bad PCs get the object. They succeed. And then they're chased by the good guys. So then the sheriff arrives, the cavalry arrives, whomever arrives, and chases them and hunts them down. And that's really where the bulk of the adventure actually needs to happen, is in that chase and getaway sequence. Because that's really where the bad PCs, the evil PCs, are out of their space, out of their comfort zone, and are trying to now survive, with all of their companions being traitors and things. That's where the real meat of that happens. So do you see how you've got Adversarial, you've got Avoidance, and how the two seem to run? They run at the same time, they do the same kinds of things, but they get totally turned on their heads from the different perspectives. It's not to say you can't swap them around and that sort of thing, but generally speaking, this is how they play, so that people who are participating can feel comfortable. That's something also to bear in mind. Sorry, this is a long video, but that is something also to bear in mind when doing a heist, is that your players need to think and feel like they are in control of the situation. And that means that as players, they need to be drawing on what they expect. They need to be drawing on what they assume is going to happen in order for them to be able to make their plans. Otherwise, they're going to feel very lost. Now, that takes me to my next point. Identify your players. And I know that people don't like doing this, but you have to profile your players if you are going to be a good GM. You need to be able to sit back and go, that player is a thinker, that player is a doer, that player is here because they need to be social with human beings, and that's what they consider being social. So that person doesn't get worried about. The thinker you need to take into consideration, and the doer you need to take into consideration. When we're talking about a heist, though, there's a less flattering way to think about your players. I generally break them up into three groups. You get the crafty groups, the groups that will think about things and they'll come up with complicated plans, and generally they'll avoid something very obvious, but they'll come up with all these sort of other wonderful things. So they make your life interesting as a game master. You get the bumbling players. Now, this is the good-natured players who get together and they have a lot of fun and they go, yeah, we've got a plan. We're going to do the distraction, then we're going to run in the back. And they don't think of an exit plan, and they don't even take into consideration that maybe the distraction doesn't work. They bumble their way through stuff, and you as a GM are on your toes because you're trying to get them to get this heist happening, because you've got 3 phases, and you know the outcome, in theory, is somewhere where you want them to be, and they're over there, and you've got to try and help them get there if you adopt my type of storytelling. You get the bumbling type, and then you get the blunt type. The blunt type are the type that will just take a bulldozer and drive it in through the front door. This is really the Kelly's Heroes type. Now, I use Kelly's Heroes, it's a Clint Eastwood movie. They had tanks. They literally just drove tanks into the bank to steal the gold, and they drove it out with tanks. There was no subtlety. There was no clever working out or manipulation of the enemy. It was just blunt. If you have blunt players, a heist is something that's too finessey for them to worry about. So how do you then break it down? Well, with crafty players, you give them maps, you give them puzzles, you give them timing issues. The guards change every 10 minutes. And when they change, they take a minute to change because they all stop here in this corner of the room, and then they work their way around every 10 minutes. Crafty players, the more details you can give them, the better. It also means that you have to plan your heist better. So do you see now how, only now, are we getting to the point where you can actually start to plan the heist? So you've got the phases, you've got the different adversarial, now you've got crafty players. Right, now you can plan it, because now you know what to plan for. You need to give them solid maps. You need to give them someone who will get those maps. So now, during the assembling of the team, you need a map maker, or you need the architect or the builder who has those plans. The plans need to have a very clear path Now, again, I'm jumping ahead. I'll come back to it. Hold that thought. For bumbling players, yes, a map is great because then they can see the layout and they can come up with their initial plan of entry. That's pretty much all they need. They need an encounter or two where they've got to dispatch a bunch of guards that they've bumbled into because they're going to anyway, let's be honest. They need some encounters to keep them going, and they need plenty of action. An explosion in the corner, some flower pots breaking and showering over everybody, a tank driving through the wall. Oh, just chaos and general bumbling fun. Absolute fun. Timing? Who cares about timing? They're going to miss the timing anyway because they're still busy stuck with the computer code. Riddles? What are riddles for? We're bumbling through. We'll just shoot the console. It worked for Han Solo. Well, why not the same for us? And then finally, if you have blunt players and you really want to run a heist, the blunt players want encounters, violence, and action. So, they don't have to plan the heist. You restructure the heist adventure to someone hiring them to do the heist. They don't work it out. There's a mastermind who says, you will go here at the specific time. You will dispatch 5 guards quietly, no firearms. Then you'll go through here where you will release this person from here and he will take you there, so you can make it complicated that way. But the actual actions that the players' characters need to go through, the players need to think through, should be violence and encounter based. And I hate saying this because it sounds like the players are thick. They're not. I'm not saying that crafty players are more intelligent than bumbly players who are more intelligent than blunt players. What I'm saying is that's the approach to role-playing that they take that brings them the most joy. And so that's what we must plan at. What brings the most joy? You have incredibly intelligent, blunt players. They just want to hit and kill stuff. There are many times that I come home where I just want to hit and kill stuff. I mean, it's life, right? So now you can plan your heist adventure. And now you can sit back and say, right, my players are crafty. They like to think things through. So my heist now needs to be an object. It really doesn't matter what the object is. You are a great GM if the object has some value to the player's characters already and they're trying to steal it back. So if it is something that they rescued 15 adventures earlier and has now become stolen again, that's great. If it's a person that they know or saved, that's even better. If it's an NPC of theirs that they've fallen in love with, that's even better. If it's their own stuff, wow, fantastic. So, what is it that needs to be stolen? Doesn't matter, it's a MacGuffin. The idea is to get the players into this type of adventure. They need to have something that they're going after. They need to know it, by the way. It needs to be very, very clear. Now, unless you're running a game where it's really complicated and they don't know what they're going after, let them know what it's going. It really doesn't matter. It really doesn't matter. You can have an NPC saying, oh, my poor daughter, that rose red ruby ring that you gave her, it's been nicked and it's put up in that tower over there. I'd like it back, please. Blunt players will just go and hack down the door and attack the tower. Crafty players will try to do this heist. All right. So you get the idea. It's a MacGuffin as to what they're trying to get. You then obviously need to have your layout. You've got your tower or your castle or your starship or whatever the location happens to be, and you populate it with guards. Now, how do you work out the timing of the guards? Well, there's a fairly simple way, in my opinion, apart from something with an actual stopwatch, but real time doesn't actually take place inside a role-playing game. Players stop to talk and debate and do all sorts of weird and wonderful things out of game, with sort of in game. It gets messy. So what I normally do is when I've got patrols happening, I'll say, right, this patrol moves from here to there, and I will quietly roll a d6 as to how long it takes them to get there. If I roll a 1, they have got slower and the PCs didn't time it correctly. If the PCs want specific timing, then that's fine. They'll get their specific timing, and I'll still roll a dice because I'll have one of the guards go, oh, I left my pen back at the last station. I'll be back now, boys. And then he turns and starts heading back towards the PCs. And if the PCs have made their stealth checks and everything is fine, although they are now tense, I'll have the other one go, "Oh no, Brian, I got your pen here. Sorry, I borrowed it for my coffee cup. I needed to stir the sugar." And of course then Brian goes back and they carry on. Tense moment, but the players are rewarded for working out the timing. And I do this because you are controlling the timing as the GM anyway. They've worked out the timing, they've put the effort in, and you've now rewarded them for it. Look, your effort of keeping track of the timing has been rewarded. Fantastic. Bumbling players, well, you can use the dice more freely, or you can just decide to give them an encounter if they're feeling as if they're a little bit bored or if they're a bit too complacent. And of course, blunt characters will have just attacked the guard straight away anyway, so you don't have to worry about them. Puzzles again, crafty players like their puzzles, but you've got to put a time pressure on, because if there isn't a time pressure, it's not a heist, it's really just a very slow archaeological excavation. So put a time pressure on. Keep a little d20 with you, and just occasionally every now and again just roll it down. That's another way of keeping track of those patrolling guards as well, if you really want to go that far. But just roll that d20 down every now and again, every time they try an action and they fail to pick the lock or to open the door, or however you want to do it. You can even just keep track of marks on a piece of paper. But you must let the players know that time is ticking down. So that's important. Puzzles, wonderful things to give to players, especially on these kinds of things, especially if it's a puzzle where they didn't expect it to happen. So you work out your flow, you work out your timing. So maybe it's 2 puzzles, 3 garden counters, a climbing exercise, and that's pretty much it. You don't want it to go on for too long. You want it to be 1 session. You don't want it to take multiple sessions. So you work out just the basics of what you would expect to happen during the actual acquisition of said MacGuffin. Now that's all good and well. How do the characters now get this information? Well, that's your NPCs. So your NPCs here are actually very, very, very important to work out very well. Dear God, this is a long video. I am so sorry. So the NPCs you then have to look at and go, right. Phase 1, I need my team to be put together. How do my players' characters work out what team they need to put together? Well, I need a guide. I need a mentor NPC who is going to help them. This could be an ex-convict, this could be an ex-worker, this could be someone who knows the facility, this could be the person who hires the PCs in the first place. So you need someone to start them on the right path. Now, if they're crafty, they'll start to do their homework straight away. If they're bumbling, you can help guide them a little bit with an NPC who's acting as a mentor or a guide. You can go and have my look at NPC uses in another video. I'm not going to go into it here. We've already spent so much time on this. But the idea is that you have someone who says, right, well, how are you planning on getting past that safe door? You need an expert in explosives. I happen to know of someone. But now they're on the other side of the planet, currently being incarcerated by that warlord. We'll have to spring them first before we can do it. Now you have an adventure where they have to go and get that demolitions expert from that warlord. It's fantastic. So a heist can be this nice complicated thing. So you work out the basics. I need these NPCs because this is the information that I'm going to give my players. I need my players to have X, Y, and Z, and this is the type of encounters that they're going to have in this heist. So it could be the exact same heist, but for 3 different groups, it's going to play out in 3 very different ways. For the crafty ones, it's going to be very calculated, almost no combat, but they don't want that. They want to have outfoxed, outsmarted the owner of that tower. For the bumbling ones, yeah, it's a bit of both. And then, of course, for the blunt ones, they really don't care. They just want to get to the MacGuffin and say that we have achieved. And, of course, then you run, whether it's Adversarial or Avoidance. I hope that this exceptionally long video, should I cut it in half? Let me have a look at that timing. Should I cut it in half? How long is it? 24 minutes. Give me some feedback on A, what you thought about the heist video, but on B, whether or not you think the video was too long. Should I have cut out something? Not repeated myself as often. I don't know. Anyway, it took me 24 minutes to explain how I would run a heist. I hope it has inspired you, it has been of benefit, and it has perhaps made you think that a heist, with all of that wonderful complexity that it adds to the story, is something that you're going to include in your next campaign. Let me know in the comments below. I do read them all, even if I don't respond to them. Sometimes you'll see a little smiley or a little heart on a comment. That's me having read it and gone, yeah, I agree. I like that. Anyway, until next time, I wish you and yours the very happiest of playing and a great weekend.